Welcome to this week's episode of Drive the Bid, the automotive podcast brought to you by AutoHunter.com, your destination for online collector car auctions. Hosted by Diego Rosenberg and Derek Shiekhi. Drive the Bid starts now.
Howdy, and welcome to AutoHunter's Drive the Bid podcast. I'm Diego Rosenberg, and I'm here with Derek Shiekhi.
That's right.
Did you have any doubt?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Today's a good day, though.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Today, we're going to be talking about the news, and we will be going over a special topic on cars that we feel defined a decade, maybe the quintessential car representing certain decades, and then, of course, our Auto Hunter picks. So, shall we start?
Yeah, sounds good.
For the news, this is you.
All right, so there's a lot of developments in the works at Mercedes-Benz, according to Car and Driver. So they had a breakdown of things to expect over the next several years. So there's new platforms. There's one that's EV specific. There's one that's what they call EV oriented. And there's a move away from low margin models like the A-Class and wagon. So unfortunately, it seems as if models like this E-Class wagon are going to go the way of the Dodo. I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always a secondary market. And then some models are sticking around. So, of course, the S-Class and the EQS, the replacements for those are supposed to be coming in 2028. And then they're really moving up market. So like I said, they're going to be cutting out the low margin models, but they're really going to be focusing in particular on, of course, AMG, but Maybach as well. And with Maybach, surprisingly, I've never really seen this mentioned before because right now Maybach is a sub-brand and a sort of trim level available on certain Mercedes models like the S-Class, the GLS. But what they plan to do going forward is to differentiate Maybach models even more from their so-called regular counterparts in an effort to go after market share that Rolls-Royce and Bentley currently occupy. So in doing that, they'll differentiate them more. They'll do limited runs and perhaps even bespoke one-off builds. So some of the potential models are like a reborn Gullwing, or what I saw referred to as the ultimate SEC class, which is kind of interesting because it was described as a pillarless four-door, four-seater luxury coupe, or what they had before, which was an S-Class coupe. That got killed off a few years ago. And then, of course, AMG has got things on the way. So they're going to develop four new high-performance EV models on an AMG-specific platform. The first one we can expect in 2026.
What is this? Is this an E-Class wagon?
Yeah, it's the E-Class all-terrain.
But is this one a Euro spec or this is American?
That I don't know.
It just looks a little bit different, or maybe it's just because they have a new E-Class now, right? So maybe this is like brand new 2024.
I mean, I know this is from their website. Usually I can tell by the license plate, but they don't have that there. But it wouldn't surprise me if this is a Euro spec model that they just happen to use the picture of.
It looks nice.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, and if that indeed comes to pass that they do away with that, I mean, obviously it's not going to be immediate, but it looks like that's in the cards. And then there's a possibility of, in a few years, I mean, that's the thing. Like they talked about with Maybach doing a reborn Gullwing, but as far as the electrification of the SL, that's another possibility. It's just within the regular SL line doing a Gullwing coupe.
I don't know. I feel like I want to say ho hum.
I give you all that, and that's all you have to say is all right, Scrooge.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm more interested in attainable cars, even if I can't attain $100,000.
I get that. Yeah, there's definitely value in that. I got to be honest with you. I was going through the news, and there's just nothing really struck me the way that did. You know?
Yeah, for sure. So this is my news. How do you pronounce this? Taycan?
I've heard it Taycan.
Taycan? Taekwondo. I don't know. That's on me. So they have a new Taycan called the Turbo GT, which is a step up from the Turbo S. Now, you may ask yourself, which is why I picked this, how can they have a turbo on an EV? And I guess it's just a trim level of sorts and no turbo. And I can't take credit for that conclusion. I have to offer that to you because I asked you that before being filmed. So good call on that. Sure. The GT, the Turbo GT rather, has over 1,000 horsepower. Technically, it's let's see my notes here. I think I forgot to mention it. 1019. It goes 0 to 60 in 2.2 seconds. However, there's something better than the Turbo GT, and it's a Turbo GT with the, forgive my German pronunciation, the Weissach package.
Okay.
And it has redone splitters, some front how do I call this? Aero blades on the nose. Forged 21-inch wheel option is available for people who want to spend that. And of course, the Weissach has this carbon fiber wing. There's also no rear seat, which makes no sense because you have this EV that's a sedan.
Yeah.
And it has no rear seat. It's like if you're going to try to be a sports car, a very large sports car, why not just get a real sports car?
Yeah, well, it's a weird kind of flex. You know, you can have your friends and open the doors and say, hey, here's where you can't sit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that exclusive.
So good point. So all these changes for the Weissach package improve 0 to 60 by 0.1 second. So that's 2.1 seconds. That's the manufacturer's claim.
Every bit counts.
Now, this car is going to start at 210,000, if I'm correct. No, 230. I have poor handwriting. Both versions, the Turbo GT and the Turbo GT with the Weissach package, will cost the same because you're missing the rear seat and a bunch of other stuff. One of the things I forgot to mention that it's missing with the Weissach package is a charging port. I guess they removed one of them to save weight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's a lot of things like that. That's why they're priced the same.
Did they mention anything about production numbers? I would imagine they're pretty limited.
No. I'm guessing this is just a regular production car, and they'll build as many as they can sell.
And sell as many as they build.
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's interesting, and it's so, again, ho-hum. What's most interesting to me is the 0 to 60.
Yeah.
And the fact it doesn't have a rear seat. It's like, it makes me want to bang my head.
Yeah.
You want me to demonstrate?
Sure.
No.
You just got to mic it right.
This can come back. My insurance company, having this on film, they can use it against me, maybe. So that's my news. It's the car. As the industry moves forward, it's more interesting and less interesting at the same time. Yeah,
I would imagine the price plays a role in it being less interesting in a certain way.
No, it's just that, I don't know. I guess I need to have more experience with electric cars and see if they can satisfy my enthusiast bent.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you can keep it charged conveniently.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I like that there's choice. There's freedom of choice in the market, and we have things to choose from. If one thing doesn't meet our needs, then we have another.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who bag on EVs, and look, they wouldn't be the right choice for my lifestyle and things like that, but it's just like television or radio programming. It's like there are a lot of people who complain and, tear down certain cars, certain shows, whatever. And it's like you said, the freedom of choice. Nobody is forcing you to buy one of these cars.
Well, I mean, that is true, but I think some people complain about the opposite. There are definitely government mandates in place. Let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, I mean, if EVs are still relatively new. So, I mean, they are, manufacturers are increasing the amount of EVs that they offer, but it's one of those things. It's like, for now, at least, and for, I would say, the foreseeable future, I think we're in pretty good shape as far as internal combustion.
Sure. Although I predict in the future, let's say 20 years from now, not that I know any better, but probably we're going to be evolving away from ICE, and what that's going to look like, I don't know. And that's cool. It's like in 20 years, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, how I'm going to feel. Maybe there's going to be this great scene of old automobiles, daily driven. Mm-hmm. The same way, it's just like there will be collectible drivers. So, it's fine. I'm cool with it. I'm down.
Yeah, to each their own. Yeah, and then, in between, there's always hybrids.
Yeah, which are usually not exciting anyway.
Well, what I mean is, like, you don't have to go. I mean, if you want to go in between ICE and EV, there's always those,
Sure. I mean, in the end, I think hybrids are still gas-powered cars as far as I'm concerned. For the most part.
Yeah.
So, they lean more towards ICE than EV.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for your Mercedes news. And
even though it put you to sleep?
No, I'm still here, right? So next, you went back home to Texas.
I did.
Yeehaw! Tell us about it.
Yes, yeah. So I thought of this, because you had your segment several weeks ago when you went down to Colombia and you were sharing your driving experiences down there. So for those of you who don't know, I grew up in a Toyota family. So at one point, it seemed like, my mom, my dad, my brother, they all had Toyota Cressidas. And then a little later on, they all had 4Runners. And my dad is still sticking with them. And he has a few different rental properties that he seems to be always working on. And several years ago, Toyota pickups have this reputation for being durable and tough and reliable, which, based on my dad's experience with his, I think he had a 92 pickup, that is very true. I mean, he put tons of miles on that. I remember one time he overloaded the bed with sheetrock, and he thought he, really damaged the engine. And come to find out, all it needed was a new water pump, and then it was alive and well after that. But I don't think, I've never really heard of their SUVs having that reputation, at least in a work context. My dad's got a couple of these third generation 4Runners, which ran from 96 to the 02 model year. And those have really shown how dependable and reliable and hardworking they can be as well. One in particular, they're a great match for my dad's lifestyle and working conditions because, yes, a pickup, you have basically unlimited vertical space, but he doesn't typically carry things that large. So the enclosed cargo area at the rear is perfect for most of his needs. It keeps it covered, it keeps it secure. And in the, occasional instances in which he needs to carry something larger, he has a roof basket up top, so he can put some stuff there. And then if he maxes out his space on and in the vehicle, he just hooks up a little trailer to the back and he's fine. And he sometimes goes down from Austin to Corpus. That's like a 3-hour drive. So he puts a lot of miles on these, tows with some sort of consistency, and is always putting them to work. And it's, he's been very happy with it.
And how were you happy with it while you visited Texas?
Yeah. I mean, I used one of the other ones. He's got a green one and a white one. And, I mean, given their age, they're pretty basic in the long run. They're not the smoothest ride, but dependable, reliable, and to me, I always had that sentimental connection to them because I remember, golly, when I was growing up, 3 different generations of them. My dad had an 87, my brother had a 93, I want to say. And then my parents had 3rd generation models. So yeah, they always have a soft spot in my heart, even though, maybe not the best ride, but you got to remember, I mean, there's, truck based, relatively primitive compared to the modern ones, but really, I mean, body on frame, and especially like you drive even a new, like a current generation 4Runner, they're pretty, trucky as far as the ride quality and all that.
Very cool. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a trucky guy, but it's like, I do appreciate durability. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. And I remember, on his truck, I mean, it was, a little older than these, but I just remember I was changing some part on it, and I just remember getting to it. It was kind of cumbersome, but it showed how overbuilt the truck was. They had, I forget what I was changing, but there were parts that seemed a little redundant or unnecessary, but it also made it, more robust, and yeah, these have definitely, I mean, the amount of mileage my dad puts on vehicles, and then, he's using them for work, like 5 days a week. They've definitely, stood up to the test.
Very good. Thank you very much. So next we have our feature, as we call it. This is quintessential cars from the for each decade, rather. What is the best car to represent each decade? Derek and I chose different decades. Some of us are the same decade, and we are going to hash it out here and discuss and hopefully not offend each other. So I did not choose anything for the 1950s, but you did. And here it is.
I did, yeah. So I went with Cadillac because, I was thinking about the 50s, and, it's after World War II, and that was a period that was following the years of World War II. There was obviously automotive booms because, we weren't in, and other countries weren't in wartime manufacturing. So you had GIs coming back from Europe, and they were buying European cars, but also American companies could get back into the swing of full-time automotive production. And then you had people that were coming from the military that could, they were out of service, so they could focus on careers and starting businesses here and, working full-time, all of that. And it was also, given that it was following World War II, it was a time of hope and prosperity and upward mobility. So to me, the Cadillac really represents that. It was in a time of aspiration, it was an aspirational vehicle.
So I did not choose anything from the 1950s, and it's because I didn't feel so secure with my choice, but I was leaning towards the Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh, okay.
So, but I think 50s Cadillacs are great. It definitely represents everything that was good about the 1950s in America at the time.
Yeah, and that's what I did, with all of my choices, was they're more America-centric, as far as our history here. But I understand you went with a more of a global perspective.
So for the 1960s, it seems that I am next, and I chose. This is a 19. This is let's say this is incorrect. 1964 Mustang. Of course, they're all 65s, but so sometimes they call these 64s and a half, 64 and a halves. And so this is from one of the introductory brochures. I also brought here a 66 because I wanted to show the different body styles, because a fastback was not available till the 65 model year. And of course, the GT package was not available till the 65 model year as well. So here we have a little bit of everything. And of course, you can see how Ford ties its Le Mans exploits, pardon my French, those racing exploits, and tries to bring them down to level on the streets. And the Mustang was just a new class of car that kind of captured a lot of demographical and psychographical things that were going on at the time. And yeah, it was an American phenomenon, but they sold a decent number overseas as well. Of course, some of the more famous ones were sold in Germany and called T5 because a company, I believe a lawnmower company, I'm not sure about that, owned the Mustang name. So, while this isn't quite a global car in the sense that it set a standard, there's still a lot of Me Too responses from around the world. You can think of, let's say, the Ford Capri in Germany or the UK. I don't really know. Maybe it was just Ford of Europe. In Asia, you could say the Toyota Celica was a Mustang influence car. So, I think this is something that represents the 60s quite nicely, and it seems that you agree with this.
I absolutely did.
Here are some. Is this Mustang number 1 or 2 or something like that?
If I remember correctly, this was at the World's Fair. I think.
Okay. So this is one of the. Okay. So this is an actual photo, because now I see there's a 64 Lincoln over there.
Yeah, and my logic with this, I was trying to think in a macro sense. The 60s, there was so many large changes in power structures, and a lot of that came from just rampant assassinations, JFK, RFK, MLK, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, So you had these organizations where these leading figures were assassinated. So of course, there's a change in the people that lead them, the organizations themselves. And so I kind of tied that into, okay, well, one of the cars that came to mind was the Mustang, because obviously Ford was doing well before the Mustang, but this really changed the iconography and the sort of power structure in the automotive industry, because it was such a rampant runaway hit.
Yeah, for sure. And I myself are not a big Mustang fan, if not a pony car fan. I tend to prefer the mid and full-size cars, but there's no denying the impact of the Mustang.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, a few years ago, Ford had, I want to say maybe it was in England or something. They had like a global Mustang owners meetup. Mm-hmm. Even though obviously their numbers overseas haven't been as healthy as they were stateside, it seems like everybody around the world knows of the Mustang.
Yep.
And that was a big change with the S550 that generation that started in 2015, because that was, I don't know if it was the first Mustang generation, but it was, that one in particular was definitely what you could call a world car, because they wanted to sell it without any restrictions around the world. I think they even sold it in China. I'm surprised it took that long, but it's known the world over, even if there aren't a ton of them overseas.
Very cool. So next, I chose something from the 1970s.
Right up your alley.
BMW 2002. Now, I believe this was introduced in 1968, but it's very much a 1970s car. And this one has the second generation taillights, not the round ones. So This is the best picture I found for the moment. I would like to have shown the original, but I think what's significant about this is the first BMW that became the mass-produced ultimate driving machine, even though in advertising, that tagline was years away from existing. But I think this is the car that kind of that set the paradigm of what for lack of better description, a family sedan could be. What BMW developed with this and pursued with the subsequent 3 Series and 5 Series pretty much set the template for all other cars, let's say sports sedans. I call them family cars, but they're kind of all the same. This is all cars want to be like this. You look at Cadillac now. Cadillac, how they're competing is because of BMW.
Yeah, and even the Lexus IS. I mean, when that first came out,
all that stuff. And then let's say, what about Mercedes? Okay, Mercedes is Mercedes, but Mercedes wouldn't be focused on BMW if BMW didn't exist. It's like BMW managed to find something to up the ante against Mercedes. And that's what that's where it all comes down to. So this to me is the quintessential landmark car for the 70s. So the 80s.
Yeah, so the 80s, the more I thought about it, again, unfortunately, there were plenty of tragedies in the 1980s. There was a change in institutions, ways of thinking, and just the outright destruction or attempted destruction of leading figures. So there was the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. There was the assassination of John Lennon. And then there was, you had these events that showed that certain institutions weren't invincible. Like you had NASA, beloved institution. You had the Challenger disaster. There was a savings and loan scandal, I think, in the late 80s. So there was I think a change in the way that certain organizations and institutions could be seen. And of course, there was a wave of technology in the 1980s, electronics, all that, what the Walkman, things like that. And so I thought, okay, a change to an institution and technology. I thought, okay, C4 Corvette. It was the first new vet since '68. They used microelectronics for certain things. And then you had the digital gauges, you had the all new suspension. And then one sort of innovation that I don't think aged very well was the Doug Nash 4-speed. But I felt like, given the overall changes brought about by the 1980s, this was a great representative of them.
I don't know what to think about this, about the choice. I guess you'll see my choice. But I think everything you say is valid. You definitely bring up, let's say, a lot of social and cultural aspects that were not on my radar, and I think you made a good case for this.
Well, and any excuse to put a C4 vet up on the screen.
That was my initial impression, but yeah. So my choice.
Ooh, all right.
In the United States, it was initially the Audi 5000. In Europe, it was the Audi 100 and Audi 200. I think this is pretty much the first car of the 80s with aerodynamics, flush windows, all that stuff. The turbo engines replacing the larger engines. I mean, of course, let's be honest. A lot of European brands never had larger engines, but the turbo was starting to come into its own. Turbo lag and all. And I think this car kind of upped the ante for what we could expect through the decade in the future. And I think the wagon's pretty spiffy as well.
Yeah. I just love the wheel wells and the wheels. That, to me, that's one, aside from, the boxiness, which is oddly attractive on these. That area always draws my eye.
I think an Audi wagon turbo 5-speed would be awesome. But then again, so would a Volvo 360 or 760 turbo wagon in the red as well. They're two different wagons. This is definitely a lot more 80s. The Volvo is still kind of the old Volvo, but they both have their attractions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you look at them and it's, instantly what decade they're from.
Yeah. So I think this is a car that a lot of people copied, and Audi was in a good trajectory until they had that 60 minutes sudden acceleration thing, which, if I recall, ended up not being quite true. Like, I think it just ended up being people pressing the gas pedal by mistake.
Yeah, that's what I remember it being. The last time I read about it was driver error.
And none of those were sticks. So, anywho, that is for the 1980s. What about 1990s?
I got nothing for the 90s, but you do.
Yeah, and I will say I'm far from an expert on the Acura NSX, but I think it kind of changed the rules for sports cars, and it made a lot of other more prestigious companies reevaluate what they were doing. Now, don't ask me how, but I think this car is pretty much, for the time, a supercar that you can make a daily driver, which is kind of a concept that's somewhat foreign, or at least was foreign at the time. And maybe the Corvette was as good as it got. And the Corvette wasn't really a supercar. I mean, it had performance. Some of the models definitely were. You can get like a Z01, or was it ZR1?
ZR1, yeah, or a Callaway.
Yeah, like that. I noticed the picture you had of that Corvette was a Callaway. But, I think this car looks great. It's got some great style. I've always liked how it has the full width taillights, like a split level full width taillight. But there's just a lot of nice packaging. This is a really cool car. I think this. I don't know if this is the right answer for the 1990s, but this is the best I came up with.
Well, it's a great pick, definitely.
And I think it's maybe easy to choose a sports car, but I don't think sports cars should be they shouldn't be depended on to reflect what may represent a decade in this discussion. But this one, I think, is worth talking about in this case. And
you can look at it along the lines of, okay, every decade has these milestone moments, or these, paradigm shifts, right? And I think, tying into what you were saying, I think this was one of those moments in the automotive industry, because it used to be, there's a Lamborghini or Ferrari. They're exotic, they're expensive, and there was a time when they were typically known as weekend cars because, they could be problematic, they could be temperamental, impractical, expensive to service.
And this car has Honda reliability for the most part. I mean,
exactly.
Its reliability record, I have no idea. But, it just seems like this car is different in all the right reasons.
Yeah. And that was, I think, one of the distinguishing characteristics was it had the mid-engine swoopy looks, angular bodywork, but it had a V6. It was a product of Honda, essentially. Now, one thing I heard about these is they have, at least at one point, they had a reputation for burning through the back tires rather quickly. And I want to say that it had something to do with the suspension layout. But other than that, you didn't have this finicky 12-cylinder monster there.
So that's my choice for the 1990s. Now the 2000s, which I think that was just me who chose one, right? The Toyota Prius. Now,
ooh, just kidding.
Now, of course, the Prius had a generation before this. This one came out in 2004. This is just a nicer picture. This 2005. This car is absolutely boring to me. In some ways, it's like the Plymouth Valiant of the millennium. It's just a nice, reliable car to get from point A to point B.
You know what I say to that, Diego?
No, I don't.
Ho hum.
Ho hum, yeah. Exactly. This is the quintessential ho hum car. However, I think this kind of, let's say, raised the bar in a limbo sort of way of personal transportation for America, if not the world. It was reliable. It was able to get gas mileage previously unheard of. And it's something that was embraced by the public without even knowing that it was really a little bit different than what had preceded it. So now hybrids are no big deal. At the time, they kind of were. There's still, I think, a lot of questions about battery technology, of course. But Toyota has shown us that maybe it's not as bad as we think.
Yeah, I mean, it's stuck because there's two things you need to line up. There are a lot of companies that try something bold and ambitious, and many times those are either ahead of their time or they never were going to have one. So they came out with this, and it just so worked out that, it was the right car at the right time, which history has shown because they're still making them.
Yeah. And I have to admit, the new ones, the redesigned ones, actually look pretty good.
They do. Yeah. Yeah. They're different in a fundamental sense, I think, though, because the ones before them, they will really embrace that techie kind of space age look. And now they're going for sexy.
Look, if that's space age, I don't want to go into space.
You're staying put right here.
Yeah. So, ho-hum, yeah, you're right. But I think this is the perfect car to represent the millennium.
Yeah, and I think you look at people that are obviously they have a faithful fan base because they've sold well over the years, and to me that really opened up the automotive. I guess you could say enthusiast community. That gave people that wanted something different and more fuel efficient and focused on other things than outright speed or sexy design, a car that they loved and trusted and embraced. So I think in that way it kind of invented a segment, and it gave people in a very different realm of the automotive landscape, something that they could call their own and faithfully support.
Mm-hmm. So we skipped the 2010s, although I'm leaning towards Tesla for similar reasons, I guess. Just upping the ante as far as what personal transportation can be for the world. But here we are, the 2020s, and you have chosen, tell us more about this.
Yeah, so I fudged this a little bit because obviously we're not even halfway through the 2020s, but I thought, okay, I felt like the Ford F-150 Lightning is a great representative of the times we're in, because in recent years, there's been this huge push for electrification, whether that's plug-in hybrids, or just outright electric vehicles. And for several years now, I'd say even before the 2020s, there's been this resurgence in the popularity of SUVs, big pickup trucks, especially high-end pickup trucks, and off-roaders, And this ticks at least a couple of those boxes, being an EV and a big truck, and if you spec it the right way, a very expensive truck. So it represents that push toward outright electrification, but at least in recent times, it also shows the sort of the aftermath of that initial push, because a few years ago, it seemed like there was a period of a few weeks where every big automotive manufacturer was saying, okay, well, we're going to be at least partially electrified across our lineup by this year. And then we're going to be fully electric by this year. And we're going to discontinue gas models by this year. Huge push. And it seemed like every manufacturer after that was kind of, saying, was getting on the same bandwagon, right? And then, of course, Ford has its own electric vehicle division now, separate from, I guess you could say Ford proper or Ford ICE. And they came out with the Lightning, I think, for the 2022 model year. And it was obviously popular because it has the brand equity of being an F-150. And then you've got something new with this cool frunk since the engine's not there. And then it's got obviously the acceleration of an EV. But in recent times, there's been this scaling back of production, and the demand hasn't been quite what they projected. And I think that's, obviously not only true for this vehicle in particular, but there has been this sort of scaling back with other manufacturers in this space. So I feel like this is just a perfect example of the times in which we find ourselves.
I feel I want to argue against this vehicle, but I did not submit something for the 2020s, so I will remain silent.
Well, if you were going to propose a different vehicle, what would it be?
Well, I was trying to think more globally.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be a truck. I don't know what it would be. That's why I didn't submit something.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, mine were confined to the United States. I haven't spent a lot of time in the European automotive realm, but yeah. Be curious to see, what you would have picked in the long run.
Yeah, I just had no more brain cells.
He can only take so much.
Yeah,
same here.
Yes, absolutely. So up next we have our AutoHunter picks, and it looks like you are the first one.
Yeah, so the one I picked is currently on AutoHunter is a 1955 Chevrolet 3600 dually. This, as you can tell by the picture, is very special in a lot of ways. So it has, this, newer black paint job. It's on an air suspension and on these massive 22-inch aluminum wheels. And inside, it's a red vinyl interior. And then it's got a red wood bed floor. And all those things are great. You got air conditioning, the air suspension controls. But I think the big party piece for this, aside from the massive wheels, is what's under the hood. So they went a completely different route. This being a Chevy, they actually went the Mopar route, and they used a 24-valve Cummins turbo diesel straight six. So I think this particular Cummins was probably, offered originally in the 90s, like probably mid to late 90s, somewhere in that area. So it's a very interesting build, not only visually but mechanically, because like in the diesel world, obviously Duramax has got a reputation. In particular, the 7.3 liter Power Strokes that Ford used to offer, and then the Cummins. So it's typically not my taste, these kinds of vehicles, but it's just such a slick, attractive build. And I could see this being a great vehicle for, as like a promotional vehicle for a company. Even if it was like a stationary billboard at an event, it just cannot help but get your attention.
I'll tell you one thing, this isn't my thing, but I'll tell you one thing I would do to change this vehicle. I would remove the rear bumper.
Oh, okay. Do like a roll pan, like a body color roll pan?
I don't know. It just seems kind of like, looks like that. It looks like a 1974 vehicle with the new federalized bumpers. Now, of course, if I wasn't aware that pickup trucks had optional bumpers, then I probably wouldn't be saying that. But I know I've seen plenty of these without bumpers, and I think that without that rear bumper, it would look a little bit better.
Oh, okay.
So that's up to the new buyer.
Yep. Speaking of which,
yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of which, if you are that potential new buyer for this, you have until Wednesday, March 20th to submit your winning bid.
Excellent. Thank you. So my first AutoHunter choice is this 1987 Toyota Corolla FX16 GTS. Now, I remember when these came out, and this was, at least from what I recall, and I'm probably wrong, one of the first 16-valve cars to appear on the market in a, let's say, in a common manner, not like, let's say, Ferrari 4 valves and stuff like that. And I haven't seen one of these in quite a long time. So this is like a pocket rocket, a hot hatch, as they called them at the time. The most famous being the Volkswagen GTI. I think this is a pretty cool car. It does have one issue, and that it's an automatic and not a stick. But otherwise, when's the last time you saw one?
I haven't seen one of these in 39 years.
Really?
So, yeah, never. I've never seen one before.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I looked up the old road tests, thinking like 0 to 60 in 8.5 seconds. And it's like, no, it's 9.8. So it's like my memory of the good times during the bad times is way off. Nonetheless, 0 to 60 in 9.8 seconds has never been more fun, I imagine. In the end, it's about driver's enjoyment as much as going fast. So if it's a little slow, so be it. This one's a little bit rough around the edges, it seems. It could use some love. I think this car is going to be great for somebody who knows these cars, and maybe something to expand on its strong points and change its bad points. Like this will make a nice template for a nicely modified FX16. You can see there's a lot of wear and tear in the interior, but that's, somebody who's into Toyotas probably can take care of all that. So this auction expires on the 15th of March, which is Friday. So that is probably a day after this podcast drops.
Well, that'd be a great way to start the weekend.
Yes.
Buying this.
Absolutely. So next, we have another AutoHunter pick for you.
Yep.
And it is this Blazer. And you schooled me a little bit saying that it went from K5 to K10.
Well, yeah, you see a lot of these, and this is badged as a K5 Blazer. You see, that seems to be the common way of referring to Blazers, K5. But of course, in the process of editing the listing for this, I was looking at the 1980 Chevy brochure, and the two-wheel drives were known as C10s and the four-wheel drives were known as K10s, just like with the trucks, C for two-wheel drive, K for four-wheel drive. But anyway, yeah, this is a 1980 Blazer with the Silverado trim. And this is...
And a stick.
Yeah, a stick. So it's a 4-speed and obviously four-wheel drive. You got the transfer case shifter down there. This has got a lot of new stuff on it. So just by itself, not knowing all the new parts, I mean, this is already attractive. You got the candy apple red and white. Now, of course, that paint is new on this, along with the Kumo tires, and then the interior's been redone. So you've got new white vinyl and red plaid cloth for the seats. You got a new red dashboard. They restored the door panels, so the red with the metallic trim. There's also new carpeting, and then they updated the headliner.
This picture right here makes it look really stubby.
Okay.
But I think this car is pretty attractive. This truck, rather. This is pretty cool. And, again, I don't like trucks, but, it's like my friend's mom had one. Of course, it wasn't a stick, but I remember riding in them. And also the dashboards have a lot of nice, like, round gauges.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And probably round idiot lights if you got the standard configuration, which isn't as desirable. But the thing is, I think round gauges are a good thing. That's something that all cars should have. This car had a really nice design for the dashboard. So this one's pretty cool. And this is a 350?
Yeah, 350, 4-speed. This also has a lift and then power front disc brakes.
Very cool.
Now, this apparently it came with air conditioning originally, but has been disconnected. But yeah, there are a lot of people. I mean, vintage off-road market is very healthy, alive and well. But then, there are people that, and I'm not necessarily one of them, but there are a lot of people that not only like off-roading, but they like doing it with a stick. So this is the best of both worlds. If you happen to be somebody like that likes stick off-roader. This has got the 4-speed. And just like that last vehicle, my last AutoHunter pick, if you're interested in this one, you have to submit your bid by Wednesday, March 20th.
Very cool. And my last AutoHunter pick is this 1960 Ford Sunliner. So I will admit that I used to love 1960 Fords. I don't like them as much as I used to. I think I prefer a 61 now. I like the rear end of the 60. I do prefer it without the Continental kit, which was available from the factory. I think especially in the Starliner hardtop, they're pretty sleek looking, but they're kind of odd also in that they don't quite resemble a Ford. Like, you don't have the trademark round taillights. You kind of have the half moons. And you can get an accessory reflector for the bottom portion. So it's kind of like 2 hemispheres, let's say.
Oh, okay.
Nonetheless, Sunliners are cool. This one has a 352 motor. We had discussed this. This car came with a 2-barrel 352 stock. Now it probably has a 4-barrel. I believe the air cleaner, someone took liberties with the air cleaner, but the car is clean. And you can see it has a nice fat master cylinder to aid in braking. Because I'm sure what the car had originally was lackluster, like most cars in America at the time. So this is a very nice, what I'll call a 50s cruiser, because of course the 50s didn't really end until the early 60s. And it's red. I think this would have a lot of appeal for many people. And this ends on Tuesday, March 19th.
Okay, yeah. So there's some time.
Yes, there is plenty of time for someone to find love with this vehicle. So that brings us to a wrap with this week's AutoHunter Spotlight. Derek, I do appreciate I appreciate you showing up. We missed you last week when you were sick.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for bearing with me through that.
Yeah.
I ate too much barbecue.
Yeah, I understand that. That's how they roll in Texas. And for you folks, don't forget to press subscribe in your YouTube feed so that you can catch more of our podcasts. And we will be back with next week with more topics, more AutoHunter cars, and even more than that. Thank you.
Thank you.